Greetings, fellow beings.
Hey guys, and welcome to the fourth installment of this series, as we carelessly find ourselves once again wandering into the veil of the Shadowverse. Just remember that you don't have to listen in the dark, so feel free to leave a light on, and just pay no mind to the lifeless figures cast onto the walls. Just think of them as dark reflections.
Number 9.
Most of you are probably already aware of the shadow people phenomenon, half-glimpsed figures on the edge of your vision. I have those quite frequently. However, this time it was something different. I saw one cross my bedroom directly in front of me. It was very late, around midnight, and I was just getting into bed. As my eyes went from the door to the hallway to the bathroom, a silhouette appeared. It seemed very solid in the torso area, but seemed to fade out as it got further down towards the legs. It moved in a motion I can only describe as skating past the edge of my bed and vanished as it reached the wall. In reaction, I stood up, surprised. As I did so, I got that extremely hot prickling sensation you get sometimes when you feel that something isn't right or there is someone watching you. The feeling like hundreds of small needles digging into your neck and scalp. Slowly and carefully, I got back into bed and looked around for a bit before turning out my light. The prickly feeling lasted a few solid minutes after the incident, remaining extremely strong and uncomfortable.
Number 8.
I have epilepsy. I was diagnosed at the age of 8, but had my last seizure at 12. Even though my seizures phased out, episodes of sleep paralysis began, and they were almost more frequent than the seizures. I didn't have the hallucinations associated with sleep paralysis at first, but when I did, it was terrifying. At the time of the incident, we had just recently moved to a new town. Adjusting was always easy since we never really lived in one place for more than 2 years. My dad lived about 3 hours away at my grandma's house so that he could stay close to work while I lived in a small condo with my mom and younger brother. Times were tough, and it was normal for my mom to be working out all night and sleeping all day as she was working at a hospital at the time. This left my brother and I alone in our condo, which was designed to very poorly replicate a log cabin. Now, as far as we knew, there was absolutely nothing strange about this place. Yes, it did have quite an eerie feeling at first, with the dark forest right outside the sliding glass doors that led to my mostly stable balcony and the insulation seeping out from in between the large logs. You know, that foam insulation spray. Someone must have loved that stuff because it was everywhere. To say that it was as close to a dream home we'd ever gotten is depressing, but true. It was one of the few nights I had gone to sleep early. I can't remember if my mom was home or not, but I suppose that it wasn't really relevant. Either way, I don't remember waking up. I only remember opening my eyes and seeing a large mass floating right above me. The darkness of the night paled in comparison to the intense black color of the floating figure. Remember how I said I had sleep paralysis episodes before? I remember very clearly when I saw it that I thought it was sleep paralysis at first and tried to move. I can't say that I wasn't terrified when I proved myself wrong and jumped into a sitting position. It's hard to describe what the shadow looked like. You guys are going to have to deal with a rather lame explanation. As it floated above me, I could tell that it was lying down. It's hard to recall exactly how the shadow looked, but I remember that it looked like a man, and he was laying on his side with his head propped up on one hand. We kind of stared at each other for a while. I don't remember if it had eyes or not, but I swear the two of us were having some sort of staring competition. I had a strange feeling the entire time. It was almost like this thing was sporting a mischievous smile that I couldn't see. Like it knew something that I didn't. I guess I lost the staring competition because all it took was a single blink before it dispersed through the room in what seemed like swirls of black smoke that it was apparently made out of. I don't remember smelling or hearing anything out of the norm, but I remember the swirling of smoke probably the most out of the entire event. After the smoke faded away, I got out of bed and investigated a little bit, only to find nothing that I should be worried about. The sun was just peeking out of the pine trees and lit up my room a little better, but I turned on my light anyway and didn't go back to sleep. Now that I think about it, one of the strangest things about this experience is that my sleep paralysis episodes have literally come to a complete halt since then. What used to be about 2 or 3 episodes a month has come to nothing since before Shadow Boy.
Number 7.
One night in my upstairs room, I awoke from my sleep to a crackling sound. I sat up and allowed my eyes to adjust, but nothing threatening seemed to be around, and no source of the sound. I shrugged and fell back asleep. I must have done so for another 5 or 10 minutes, and yet another sound emerged from the room. A creaking sound like rusted hinges. I sat up again and reached for my knife under the pillow beside me, paranoid as I am, as I was alone in the house and have no pets. Then I left my room and I walked around downstairs. Nothing. I returned to bed, satisfied that I was just imagining things. I slept another 30 minutes, probably, and got this chilling feeling on my spine, despite having the heat up and a blanket on. I slowly opened my eyes and rolled over onto my side, and on the side of my bed was a featureless shadow silhouette, static outlined figure with both hands raised above me, fingers drooped downward as if warming them over a fire. I was in shock because it was not human looking, although it did have the frame and figure of a man. Within roughly 4 seconds, and I mean 4 seconds, it dropped its arms, turned around, and frame by frame walked into the darkness of my bathroom's open door and disappeared. I jumped up and ran after it, flipping on the light, and nothing there. To this day, I know what I saw and have no decent explanations for it. Perhaps a state between dreaming and wakefulness? I don't know, but I will never forget that experience for the rest of my life.
Number 6.
Okay, just to start this off, I am a 15-year-old girl, and what I'm about to tell you is actually happening to me and my friends. This whole thing started when my 2 friends, Stephanie and Susan, and I, and Susan's boyfriend, Rory, were all sleeping over Susan's house. Rory left to walk home, but came back 15 minutes later saying that he had heard footsteps behind him, but no one was there. Stephanie and Susan went to look outside while I stayed inside because I was too scared. They came back inside, and Stephanie told me that she had not heard any footsteps, but she had seen a tall man in a black coat who was kind of blurry around the edges. She had later said this to Susan, and Susan said that she had seen it before, and that it had followed her for a while. After this, I got really scared. They stayed up for a few hours while I tried to go to sleep, so daylight would come. I was listening to the others talk, and when I was just about to fall asleep, I heard Steph say,
"Oh, Susan, is that him?"
Susan went, "Yes." I heard this, and I thought they were playing a joke on me, so I opened my eyes to tell them to shut up. But when I looked up, I swear, there was something by the door. It looked like a shadow, but it had a human shape. Stephanie yelled at it to go away, and it just disappeared. After this happened, there was kind of an unspoken agreement not to talk about it, until one day when Susan came to school looking real upset. Stephanie and I asked her what was wrong, and she said she had been seeing the black thing a lot more than usual, and that she was even seeing him at school. Susan went to see the school nurse, and they ended up sending her to heaps of specialists who did a lot of tests on her, but they could not find anything that would make her have hallucinations. Then, not too long afterwards, Steph, Rory, and I started seeing the black thing as well. He would show up just as you were about to fall asleep. You would get this feeling you were being watched. When this happened to me, I opened my eyes for a microsecond, and in that microsecond I saw him there, watching me. I would get this feeling like my whole body was seizing up and I felt like I was shaking, but I wasn't. When this happens, I spend the rest of the night with the blanket over my head and my eyes squeezed shut until I eventually fall asleep. As I have said, how could the black thing be a hallucination if all four of us have seen him? If anyone has any idea how to get rid of him, I would really like to know.
Number 5.
This happened last week on a Wednesday. It's been a while, but I remember everything. In the moment, I tried hard to remember every little detail and discounted anything that could just be my imagination or a trick of my mind. I've come to the conclusion that I definitely saw what I think I saw. There was a shadow standing at the foot of my bed all night. I know, for all the buildup, this really isn't that big of a deal, but for someone that's never had any sort of encounter like this, aside from vague feelings of unease and being watched and whispers in my ear at night, it was extraordinary. It was midnight. I was sitting at my desk writing. I get this strange feeling of being watched. I ignore it because I feel that all the time and didn't think it was anything. I go to bed, get all snuggly and comfy, then my eyes start to adjust to the darkness. Here's where things get weird. My eyes have fully adjusted to the dark now. I just happen to glance up and boom! Since I am a scared little girl at heart, I hide under the covers. I had this odd feeling going through me. You ever hit a tuning fork and feel it vibrate? I got that all over my body. It sort of felt like static. I wanted to be sure it was actually a thing, so I popped my head up and looked at it for a good 5 seconds. It was light gray and very, very tall. It reached the top of my closet door, which is about 6 feet tall. I could distinctly see a head, a neck, and a body, but no other features. I kept hidden underneath the blankets and maneuvered to where I couldn't see it. I forced myself to stop freaking out and relax. After a few minutes, I found that I didn't feel anything negative or bad. Yeah, I was a little shaken by the shock, but I didn't feel like I was in danger. It didn't seem like it wanted to hurt me. It seemed like it just wanted to watch. I reasoned that it could be 3 things. A malevolent, negative creature that was trying to not seem threatening, in which case I didn't want to piss it off. B, a neutral thing that was just chillin', which I don't want to turn against me. Or C, a good positive thing that was watching over me, in which case I don't want to offend it. I decided to go to sleep and wait until morning instead of confronting it. I was already pretty tired and didn't feel too scared, so I eventually got to sleep. I woke up around 6:30 a.m. I heard my mother getting ready for work outside my room. I'm homeschooled and usually don't get up until about 7:30. I was relieved because I thought the thing was gone. I tentatively looked up, and motherfucker's still there. He's closer even. At night, he was closer to the closet. Now he was right up against the bed. I got that vibrating static feeling again. I got it every time I looked at it. About 6 times I looked at it. It was still pretty dark in my room, but starting to get more bluish than gray. I'm pretty annoyed at this point, and I was contemplating sitting up and asking it, "What the fuck?" I'm not just saying this to sound tough. I came extremely close to doing it. However, I decided to just chill until it got light, and it would hopefully go away. I kept this sheer black sheet that I can sort of see through over my head and glanced at the shadow thing from time to time. I managed to fall asleep again for a few minutes, during which I had a nightmare about the shadow, but I think that was just from the stress of the whole situation and not actually anything. I woke up around 6:55 a.m. and it was gone. Needless to say, I turned on every light in my room and went to see my mom. I sound like a pussy, but whatever. I was freaked out. I was paranoid for more than a few hours, constantly looking over my shoulder where it stood. But after it got light and I got focused on schoolwork, I forgot about it. Until the next night, of course. I thought of and tested every possible explanation. The next night, I tried to see if the light coming in through my window, which I always leave open, would have caused it. I hadn't even fallen asleep the first time I saw it, and I could move all of my body parts. It couldn't have been a hallucination from lack of sleep. A, I've stayed up for 38 hours straight without any sort of incident like that. Recently, about a week before this event even. And B, I had only been awake for like 15 hours that day. I started reading other people's encounters with shadow people. Mine seemed a lot less negative and scary than theirs, and for that I'm glad, but it bothers me how long it stuck around. Why would it stay and watch me all night?
Number 4.
It was about 4 to 5 years ago when I was still a sophomore in college. Finals for the fall semester were finally at an end, and it was time to go home for winter break. My family lives about 3.5 to 4 hours away from my university, but because I had to take the bus home, it ended up being around a 6 to 7 hour trip due to a transfer and a really long layover period. It wasn't too late when I finally arrived home, maybe around 3 to 4 p.m. The sun was still lingering in the sky, and so there was still some daylight left. My dad picked me up from the bus station. Once I got home, I was pooped. I greeted my mom, sister, and dog with hugs and kisses. After settling in some, I decided to take a nap. Taking my dog up into my arms, I headed into my room and shut the door. My dog is a small white Havanese. Never really minded sleeping with me on the bed, but he would occasionally wake up earlier than me and walk around the bed, jump down and scratch on the door to go out, etc. You know, normal dog stuff. But I digress. I took my dog with me and lay down in bed for my nap. There was still some daylight poking through my half-open blinds, and laying on my stomach, I soon fell asleep. Almost as soon as I had fallen asleep, I awoken in my room, only it was pitch black in there. I could only surmise in retrospect that it was some plane of existence not of our own, but it seemed all too real. The room was so dark you could hardly see a thing save for dark silhouettes of various furniture in my room. Anyways, I awoke face up, and this is important, to notice that the light from outside was completely gone, and I assumed that I had slept in late. Looking to my left, I noticed my dog in the same spot that I had left him. Only he wasn't sleeping like I had last seen him. He was curled up in a ball, but alert and looking up, staring at something and quivering like he had seen the devil himself. Wondering what he was staring at, I decided to turn my head and look to the right. That's when I saw it. This huge 6 to 7 foot man standing right over me, only it wasn't a man. It had the silhouette of a man, except it was just this empty void and there were no outlines of clothing, its face, or anything. It took me a second to register in the darkness that there was a man, in fact, standing over me. Feeling the energy drain from my body, I felt this incredible fear that I've never felt in my entire life. I've been scared shitless by friends for kicks, but nothing compares to the fear of an unwanted intruder standing a foot away from you. Now I have read that there are different types of shadow people, the mostly benign and the malicious. This one was of the more malevolent kind. I could tell because I noticed it was staring dead at me, but it seemed to be breathing heavily in and out. But the kicker is, it appeared to have this intense hatred for me, like it wanted me dead or something. It's just one of those feelings you can get from looking at someone who doesn't like you. You know, well, after a stare down that seemed to last for minutes. It finally reached out to grab me. I could feel it grabbing me, so I kicked back, trying to kick my heavy blanket off so I can fight back or run away. At the same time, I tried to scream for help, but absolutely no sound would come out of my mouth, like I didn't have any vocal cords. After a moment of this, I finally screamed bloody murder at the top of my lungs, awakening from my slumber from the same position I was when I had fallen asleep. Laying on my stomach, I also noticed that it was dusk, and that there was still a little daylight left, very visibly different than what it looked like in my sleep. I've had lots of dreams that I can recall for the sake of attempting lucid dreaming, but none of them felt more real than this. Now, before you categorize this experience of mine as sleep paralysis or something of that nature, I want to remind you that my sleeping position upon falling asleep and waking up for real were the same. It was only in this dream that I was sleeping facing up.
Number 3.
This is a recollection of something I just cannot explain, and it terrifies me. When I was younger, I would always find myself waking up in the early morning. Normally, you would expect to be greeted by a parent or sibling, but this was not the case for me. What I saw was much less welcoming. What I saw was the shadow of a man standing right over me. As a young child, this terrified me. I would be too scared to move and would lay paralyzed, hiding under my blankets in fear, hoping one of my parents would come and wake me. This image of a man standing over me greeted me every morning for as long as I can remember sleeping in that room. Things I can clearly remember involve him changing positions in my room. Sometimes he would be hunched over near the head of my bed. This was his favorite position. Other mornings, I would wake up and looking around feeling the sense of relief only to spot him at the end of my bed or crouched over in the corner. I kept writing it off as a trick of the light, but something inside me said otherwise. I changed my room in our house a few times, but I can't remember anything specific or as vivid as the shadows I saw when I was younger. Around my early teens, I finally got my own room. Granted, it was the smallest room in the house, but it was still mine. I completely forgot about the shadow that had haunted me in my first room. However, some nights and mornings, I would wake up and see something moving out of the corner of my eye. Reminiscent of my childhood, I would always instinctively pull the bed covers up over my head and try to fall back asleep. This time I put it down to just staying up too late, reading scary stories and my mind playing tricks on me. I can't remember any specific encounters with them, but I have woken up a few times to see the outline of something dark hovering over me. The only thing I can confidently say is that I have always felt a strong presence of someone constantly watching over me. I had completely forgotten about him until very recently. Last week, while staying at my girlfriend's house, I woke up to her jabbing in the middle of the night to me, repeatedly whispering, "Wake up, wake up." I turned groggily, a little annoyed because she never lets me sleep in, only to have her whisper to me in a terrified voice, "There's a shadow of a man standing over you." Suddenly, all the images of him from my childhood flooded my mind. I did the only thing I could, and I pulled the covers over my head, thinking, I hope he stops watching me. My most recent experience with the Shadow Man was tonight, dating August 10th, 2011. It happened around 8:30 p.m. My girlfriend was curling her hair in the hallway. Nerdily enough, I was playing Portal 2. We were planning on going out, so she was curling her hair. Plans were going as expected. I couldn't wait to get out. Really was looking forward to it all week. Then she calls my name. "Come here now!" I replied, okay, what's wrong? She appears in my doorway asking me, "Was that you walking past in the hallway?" I replied, no. Laughing, thinking that she thought I was doing something else. This was not the case, as she was whimpering at me, saying that she saw a shadow man walk up the hall past my room. I was really freaked out by hearing her say that. I asked, was it looking at her? And she said, no, it was looking at you. I am genuinely freaked out.
Number 2.
This happened in 2011. I live in a medium-sized town in North Carolina on a major highway, so aside from the few bumps in the night from the stray animals, nothing particularly paranormal happens here. The guy who owned the house before my family did used to rent out what is now my room to a veteran who would swear up and down that there was a ghost in my room. My house is around 100 plus years or so old, so my family and I wrote it off as mice. Old house noises, or the poor guy having war flashbacks. Anyway, one night I had left work late, driven home and passed out. I had a dreamless blackout type of sleep, but snapped suddenly awake sometime in the middle of the night because I felt someone was watching me. My heart was pounding, and I decided to pretend like I was still asleep until I was sure there was someone in my doorway. I very, very carefully turned my head just the tiniest bit and opened my eyes just a bit. And I saw a man in my doorway watching me. I was confused. For some reason I thought a coworker had followed me home, as the man in my doorway was around the same height of one of my coworkers. But I knew it wasn't him. There was absolutely no light coming in from outside my windows or from the hallway beyond my room, which is impossible because of the streetlights that dot the neighborhood, yet there was no light whatsoever. The man was a black figure, but he was a darker black than the darkness around him, like he was sucking all the darkness into him. I somehow knew that this shape was a male presence and that he meant me no harm whatsoever, but I still got the vibe that he was dangerous, even though he wasn't here to harm me, and that I should be as still as possible and not move or speak. I felt frozen in place, but I didn't feel fear like I had when I woke up. About 45 minutes or so went by, and not a single car drove by, which is unusual because of, as I said, I live on a major highway. It's always active. After about 45 minutes, I just kind of drifted off to sleep, and the man was still in my doorway watching me. I felt pretty safe and comforted. When I woke up the next morning, everything seemed normal. I did not tell my parents until a few months later. My dad said maybe he'd come upstairs to check on me, but I knew that wasn't the case. Old house, creaky stairs, I would have heard him coming. Also, this shadow man was skinnier than my dad. My dad stopped checking up on me in the night because I wasn't rolling out of bed in my sleep anymore, so that rules out my dad. I also have ruled out an evil presence, as my family is religious and had each room in the house blessed, and no evil spirits can enter. I thought maybe it was an angel or my deceased older brother watching over me. The possibility that this man was a shadow figure is still there, and a friend of mine talked about different possibilities of shadow figures. I know for a fact this was no dream. We discussed the possibility of maybe I kind of projected my desire for a comforting male presence in my life, and they took the shape I saw that night, which is a possible explanation, as I was mourning 2 male family members and fighting with my dad almost every day. Thanks to the soldier who said my room was haunted, I have not ruled a ghost or a spirit out. However, I have had no other experiences that would denote a haunting, and think maybe the soldier had a nightmare flashback associated with PTSD. The Shadow Man is still a mystery to me, and I have not seen him since, but that one encounter has left a definite influence on me.
Number 1.
My partner and I just moved into our first house together in March. He usually falls asleep before me. One night, while I was awake and lying next to him sleeping in bed, I noticed what looked like a dark shadow hovering above me near our ceiling. I have a tendency to freak myself out, so I made myself ignore it, and then I fell asleep. I also have really terrible eyesight. I'm incredibly nearsighted with bad astigmatism. And without my glasses or contacts, I didn't necessarily trust that I was seeing things correctly. I kept thinking that I saw it on different nights after that. Again, I didn't trust my vision. One night, I was in bed next to Chris and looking up, and this fucking shadow thing suddenly appeared directly above me, about 3 feet from my horizontal body. It was a shapeless shadow about my length, and it looked somewhat grainy, like static, and also a bit smoky in appearance, if that makes sense. An unbelievable sense of fear and panic came over me. I felt frozen by it. I fell asleep super quickly. It almost seemed like someone had flipped a switch and put me to sleep. In the following days, I mentioned that I had seen this thing to Chris. He is not like me in the sense that he doesn't or didn't believe in the paranormal. He's an amazing man, though. He still heard me out and listened to me. A week later, we are in bed, and he says, "I've seen that thing you talked to me about." I turn to him, and he looks almost ashamed, but absolute, as if he is telling me the total truth. He tells me that he has seen this shadow hovering above my body, but when he focuses on it, it dips down lower and then sort of slides up over our heads and seemingly out the window. This is a man who does not believe in ghosts, paranormal entities, energies, etc. In fact, I said to him,
I thought you didn't believe in all that stuff.
And he said,
I never had any experiences that gave me a reason to until now.
I had and have a instinctual feeling that the shadow was a manifestation of some of the seriously dark memories I had been obsessing over during that particular time period. And my gut tells me it had something to do with my extreme anxiety. Once again, I would like to thank you guys for listening. I hope you have been enjoying this series, if not, being able to just relate to some of these stories yourself. I know they're not all exciting, but sometimes the real true stories just aren't that exciting. They're just thought-provoking. As you will find out tomorrow, if you stick around, that I can relate to many of the elements or situations I have up to this point read about. Be sure to comment, like, and or subscribe to my channel, and even if you're not one of the subscribing, commenting, or simply clicking that little thumbs up button type of person, I still encourage you to come back tomorrow when I will share with you my experiences with unexplained shadow phenomenon. Until then,
Be aware and keep your eyes open.